Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with old-fashioned fried hot water cornbread. That's right, when I started researching this recipe, I saw people calling it the most southern of all the southern cornbreads, which I didn't really understand, but then I started making it, and it actually made sense. And it is definitely my favorite new way to eat cornbread. And to get started, we will mix up our dry ingredients, which of course will include some cornmeal. And we're supposed to use finely ground, but after some testing, I decided I preferred the texture of the medium grind, but either works. And then to that we will add some all-purpose flour, a little bit of sugar, some salt of course, and then we'll finish up with some baking powder, which is definitely not the same thing as baking soda, so double check you got the right one. And that's it. Once everything's in, we'll take a whisk, and we will whisk. And we will keep whisking until everything's thoroughly combined, at which point we'll stop and pour in the star of the show, some very, very hot water. As in water I've brought to a simmer in a tea kettle. And for 2 cups of cornmeal, I find about 1.5 cups of water to be perfect. Although this really does vary, recipe to recipe, whereas some use less for a stiffer dough, whereas some use a lot more, and they actually have to spoon this into the hot oil like a batter. But either way, we'll go ahead and take a spoon and carefully mix this all together, starting very slowly at first so you don't splash out the water and burn yourself, and also throw off your measurements. And once we do have this all thoroughly and thoughtfully mixed, while this is still warm, we'll toss in the last ingredient, which is an optional chunk of butter, and we'll go ahead and mix that until it disappears. And no, not everybody likes to add fat to this dough, or if they do, they'll use something like bacon grease or lard. Or if you're one of these bearded hipster chefs, maybe some duck fat. But anyway, you decide. I mean, you are after all the Valeries of making this with more calories. But either way, once we have everything mixed up, we'll go ahead and divide this into 8 equal portions. And for that, I like to use this ice cream scoop, which is fast and easy, and a good way to keep these all nice and uniform. Plus, since we're already starting with a nice round shape, it's going to give us a head start as we eventually form these into patties. Oh, and that parchment paper you see on the pan is not just to make cleanup easier. As you'll see, that's going to make it easier to pick these up once they're chilled. But before we pop these in the fridge, we'll go ahead and give them their final shape. And to do that, we simply lay a piece of plastic over the top, and then we'll lightly press these down until they're about 3/4 to an inch thick. And then the final step here would be to smooth out the tops, just so these fry nice and evenly, and have a little more of a uniform look. So that's exactly what I did before I popped them in the fridge for about an hour, which is going to allow them to firm up a little bit. Although I should mention you can transfer the dough right from the bowl to the fryer, which is how a lot of people do it. But I've tried it both ways and find this works out a little bit better. And that's it. With the help of the parchment paper, we will flip these over onto our hand, and then we'll head to the stove and transfer this into some 350-degree oil. But not directly. That's too dangerous. I recommend we use a spatula to lower that into the hot fat, which I probably should have oiled first to make it slide off easier. But anyway, no matter what method you use, as long as you don't burn yourself, you did it right. And unless you lay these on top of each other, you should not have a problem with them sticking together. But to hedge our bets, we can always poke around with the edge of the spatula to make sure. And that's it. We'll simply fry these for about 3 minutes per side, or until they've cooked through and browned up beautifully. And yes, of course, because I'm filming, one of them decided to puff up due to some kind of air pocket in the middle, which did not happen to any of the other ones, or in any of the test batches. But anyway, I can't even pretend to be concerned. Oh, and in case you're wondering, yes, you can totally shallow fry these in like just a 1/2 inch of oil, which I did for one batch and it worked out fine. But anytime we deep fry, the more oil we have, the easier things are going to be. And that's it. After giving the second side about 3 minutes, I went ahead and transferred those onto a rack, at which point I fried up the other 4. And as you can see, every single one is the exact same shape and size, except for those couple that aren't. But as they probably say in the South, close enough for cornbread. And then it wasn't easy, but I let those cool for about 10 minutes before I broke one open to go in for the official taste. And yes, I picked the puffy one, which was still perfectly fine and had a beautiful crumb. And that, my friends, is a very memorable cornbread experience. Okay, the taste is very familiar, But having that crusty, sort of crispy exterior surrounding the cornbread makes for something that's new and exciting. And if you're wondering, are these just larger, bigger hush puppies? Well, I really can't answer that. But also probably yes. Although in this larger format, it really is different texturally. But as far as the basic recipe goes, yes, it's very similar. And these really are nice eaten warm just like this. Or of course maybe slathered with some honey butter. But before we sign off, I did want to show them in their natural habitat, which would be broken open and stuck in a bowl of beans. Oh yeah, now that is a meal. Actually, probably a couple meals. But anyway, that's it. My take on old-fashioned fried hot water cornbread. This is an absolute must-make for any cornbread lover. And I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.